Hello, is everybody still on? It's 1:35.
Okay.
Yep.
I'm ready.
Henry, did we hear anything?
Yes, Chairman Vasquez. So unfortunately, we cannot get the closed captioning confirmed past 2 o'clock, but we were able to extend all the other service providers until 3:30. What we are going to do, and this is an announcement to the public, is if the closed captioning stops at 2 o'clock, we will make sure that we have the balance of the meeting closed captioned and put on our website. So unfortunately, it will not be in real time, but we will make accommodations for those needing closed captioning. It will just be a few days after the board meeting. So with that, the board members are clear to continue this meeting until 3:30.
All righty. So I'm going to suggest then, moving forward, that everybody having the opportunity to at least share their immediate goals that they see, within the next 90 days, and kind of hold off on your midterm and your long-term suggestions so we can get through this. And then obviously we'll open up to the Q&A, because I know members have already expressed that they would like to ask questions of those that are still sitting on the line, especially the speakers that are kind of waiting for us for any questions we may have. So with that, I am going to go ahead and start with my short-term thoughts in terms of what we can do within the next 90 days. And for me, the key, the big one, that we've already started is just continue to work with the governor's office to find out if, in fact, he's willing to give the BOE this executive order or grant our order that would allow or at least give the BOE, the board, the possibility or grant the time extensions if we choose to use them. Give us that administrative duties and powers. That was the one I was thinking that's on. The other two that I have here would be provide immediate guidance through an LTA, encouraging assessors to allow taxpayers to submit Form 571, the business property statement, with the best information they have by May 7th, and allow them to amend by May 31st without a penalty under Section 441. The next would be to provide immediate guidance through the LTA, encouraging assessors to allow taxpayers to submit an incomplete Form 571 business property statement without a wet signature, Section 441. And those are the immediate ones. I'll hold back on my ones I consider midterm and long-term. And then let me turn to the members. I'll start with our Vice Chair, Mr. Schaefer. What are your thoughts?
Hi, this is Member Schaefer calling. I agree with everything that Tony has said. I'm very appreciative of the opportunity to meet with all of these speakers today. I was very impressed with what every one of them had to say, and I made notes. And I pledge my cooperation to Chair Vasquez.
Thank you. Member Cole, actually, I guess it would be Member Gaines.
Oh, yeah. Thank you, Chair Vasquez. I agree with the points that you've already expressed. I think if we can address the electronic communication of wet signature, that would be very helpful, and we ought to do that immediately. On this Section 170 issue, I'd sure like to dig in and take a much closer look at it. We're hearing varying opinions from Marcy Berkman versus Marty Vacacian versus Mr. Meyer. And I think we ought to dig into those and explore those and figure out exactly, what can we do. The calamity relief issue, I think, is a big one. And if we cannot provide that relief to business owners, I'm really concerned about small business owners here. They don't have the depth. They don't have the financial backing to be able to survive for very long. And so if we can provide some relief on valuation as a result of the pandemic and do that more quickly, I think that would help resuscitate the economy so that we can get the tax revenue going. We've got to have private employment in the state of California for even the government to function. We're going to go through the state's rainy day fund in a New York second. That money's going to be gone quickly, and we've got to figure out how to revive the economy. So I want to take a close look at that, and then getting back to this Section 155, I want to explore that. Can that be extended more than once? Is it just a single 40-day opportunity? And there's a lot of nuances to that, so I really want to flesh that out and find out if we have some flexibility there. So that's it. I appreciate the speakers. I thought this agenda was well laid out. I want to thank all the speakers for their input. It's very informative, very helpful, and I'm hoping that we can continue to work together on really critical matters. And I think the pressure is going to only increase over time. So the more we can take action in a quick manner, the better. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Cohen.
Yes, thank you. Excuse me. Fellow members, well, thanks for your feedback. And I believe significant priorities have been raised by colleagues as well as the presenters. I, however, would like to propose that we find a way to dig deeper on the issues that are raised today. For example, is it possible to establish a working group of assessors and board members to meet over the next 2 weeks and determine which immediate actions we need to take to address issues that we've heard today? I'm trusting that the executive director could provide some kind of guidance on our options. I just have more questions and want to make sure that we provide the assessors with what they need, and also address the appeals board some of the concerns that were raised today. Mr. Chair, I feel like we're transitioning into closing remarks, and I have questions to pose to the presenters, and I'd like to be able to pose those questions to the presenters before we lose them. So I'm wondering, how is now a time for me to make my questions?
Yes, once you go ahead and you're right, because they're sitting there before they have to leave, and I'm sure they're waiting.
Okay. Okay, so great. I guess so. Let me think. Let me organize my notes here. Okay, so my question for Mr. Nangio and Mr. Moon, I was wondering if either one of you gentlemen are able to provide any feedback on the issue discussed today related to Proposition 8, the decline in values. It came up a couple times on the discussion. In the discussion, I raised it in my opening remarks. I'm interested in whether calamities have an impact on such decisions. I think Mr. Gaines also raised in his remarks, just briefly, raised some questions around Prop 8. Again, this is the decline in value, whether the calamities have an impact on such decisions. And then I guess my other follow-up question is, should we be bringing these issues, exploring a request for the Attorney General to offer an opinion?
Thank you, Member Cohen. Richard Moon, I think you're on the line. Would you like to take first shot at it?
Sure, I am on the line. Thank you, members of the board. In addressing Ms. Cohen's question, there are actually two separate issues. One is the general decline in value, the Prop 8 reductions that are done generally, and then there's the calamity provision that other speakers have been referring to Revenue and Taxation Code, Section 170. So with regard to Section 170, we believe that there is some physical damage required. There's a case, I believe, that Ms. Berkman had referred to that's directly on point. And so we believe that Section 170 by itself, as it stands today, would not allow reductions in the middle of the year for purely economic damage. So it would take a legislative change, I think, as one of the speakers from CADA had brought up. So that would be the appropriate avenue. I think if we were to ask the Attorney General's opinion, I think their answer would be the same because that case is out there.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Moon. I appreciate that. I have a question. So we heard from our large urban and mid-sized assessors. I was curious to know if there is a smaller county assessor on the line that may speak to any of the unique challenges or needs of a smaller county. I'd love to hear from them at this time if possible. I know we had Mari Wilson scheduled to speak, and somehow signals got crossed. So I don't know if she's on or if there's any other small county assessor that's able to speak to some of their issues. I just want to make sure that the record fully reflects large counties, mid-sized counties, as well as a small county. Okay, sounds like there isn't.
If anyone has a comment or question, please press 10.
All right, thank you. It doesn't sound like there is a small county assessor. Mr. Gakel, just please note if you're still on the call, we need to always include large, mid-sized, and small county assessor voices in our conversation. So just help me keep a watchful eye over that. So, Mr. Manangio and Mr. Moon, one more question to you. Is it possible to have the board briefed on issues, including the recent action by the Judicial Council which we heard raised by one of our presenters? This was actually new information to me. I don't think this body's ever heard of this, so I'd love to hear a little bit more about this. Is it possible to get a briefing on this?
Yes, we can look into that and get either a briefing at a board meeting or some written document to the board. So I'll have my staff work on that, Member Cohen.
Oh, okay, perfect. Also want to acknowledge Mr. Moon. I think he answered my question. I wanted to put it to a larger group if there's any presenters on the call that are in agreement or disagreement with something that Mr. Moon said. I want to give you an opportunity to speak.
This is Marty Duquesne and Board Member Cohen, if I may be heard.
Yes,
sure,
please.
go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Board Member Cohen. So I have a lot of respect for Richard. I totally disagree with him regarding the Slocum case. The Slocum case defined physical damage to include two categories of physical damage: direct physical damage, which is the structural damage to which Mr. Moon is referring, and indirect physical damage, which the Slocum case specifically and explicitly defined as restricted access due to a major calamity or a disaster. So, there's confusion here as to what is meant by physical damage, and the legislature in Section 170 has defined physical damage specifically to mean diminution in value resulting from restricted access due to a calamity. So the Attorney General, I don't know what the Attorney General would opine, but a plain reading of the statute, I think, indicates that calamity claims need to be granted. There's no need for additional legislation. The statute's very clear. 170A1, very clear.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, this is Larry Stone in Santa Clara County. I'm searching my memory here, but as I recall, in 2001, the BOE adopted a rule granting relief to the airlines under R&T Code 170, misfortune and calamity. And as I recall, the court rejected that rule, which is very similar to what we're talking about now.
Actually, that's not correct. The Slocum case did turn out against the taxpayers, as Assessor Stone indicated. but here's a direct quote from the case. Nonetheless, we recognize in Section 170, Subdivision A1 and 3, the legislature delineated two exceptions to the general meaning of damage or destruction as implying direct physical injury to the property, thereby providing limited relief for indirect physical damage. That is a direct quote from the case. And there's one of the case headings that says direct physical damage is a requirement of Section 170A2, but not of A1 and 3. And then the court goes on later specifically to describe restricted access as indirect physical damage. So correct that the airlines lost, incorrect that that has any bearing on the COVID-19 situation.
Okay, I'm going to continue with the rest of my questions.
Ms. Cohen, this is Don Gakel. I just wanted to let you know that Chuck Lenhart of Plumas County has been following the proceedings, and he might be willing to speak on that.
Oh, fantastic. Would the assessor for Plumas County please just kind of share your perspective on how things are going from small county perspective?
I guess he would have to be unmuted somehow. So,
Please press 1 followed by 0 to make a comment.
This is Vice Chair Schaefer calling. I move that the chair and the vice chair, Mr. Vasquez and myself, we form a working group of the Board of Equalization and county assessors to meet by teleconference over the next 2 weeks and present our findings to the board. Is this helpful?
And we do have one in queue.
This is per Member Cohen.
Thank you, Member Schaefer. Hold that thought. Yes, the answer to your question is yes, it's helpful. But there's a assessor from Plumas County that is looking to chime in.
That's fine.
Assessor, are you there? Okay, Don, it doesn't look like this person is able to get on.
All
Press
right.
1 followed by 0 if the operator has taken your name.
Press 1 followed by 0 in order to speak.
One moment, please. And your line is open for question.
Assessor?
Please press 1 0 one time, please. Okay, your line is open.
Plumas County, are you there?
I'm here.
Charles?
Can you hear me?
Wonderful.
Open.
Thank you. Yes. Okay.
Okay. Please restate your question.
Sure. My question is just pretty simple. We heard from large counties. We've heard from mid-sized counties, and I wanted to hear from small counties on some immediate actions that the Board of Equalization should be addressing. You wanted to speak to Prop 8 issues. I mean, it's just an opportunity for you to share some of the things that you've processed.
Thank you for this opportunity. First, I will discuss business property statements since we've talked about that a lot today. I think our experience is probably similar to Santa Clara's in that the greater majority of our statements, or at least a similar volume as with Stanislaus, have come in so far this year. Though, again, we wait. Many of our professional practitioners don't file until right near to the deadline. But I strongly support the CAA's position on extending the filing date and the period to make changes. With regard to Prop 8, I understand there are many who have spoken today who indicate that they feel there's been significant damage to the economy. The challenge I see in my market is that we have a fairly low volume of sales as it is, but it also takes time for the market to react to a particular event. In the Great Recession, It took us almost 2 years before we started seeing significant decline. However, we did see a long period of stall before the correction took place. So I have some strong questions about how Prop 8 could be instituted in its present form in a manner to address something where I don't believe we currently have enough market data to support what kind of a change would be made. I don't believe that extending the March 31 deadline in the short term is going to provide assessors with significant data to be able to close the tax roll on a timely basis. And I think I would appreciate it if you would remember that while I have also filed for a 40-day extension, it's my hope that I won't need to use it, but I'm doing it as a prudent business precaution. There's been some conversation today about whether or not it could be extended multiple times. And I think there have been some very good comments made, which I would like to reiterate, that the timelines that we have to close the tax roll, involve a whole lot of departments that have to do their particular part in order to produce timely tax bills. As I've spoken with my board, and as we talked about whether or not we were an essential function, I indicated to them that I felt we had to be because currently under the pandemic situation, governments are spending a lot of money, and we need to take the steps to continue to get timely revenues in to support their operations.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate hearing from you. I don't have any other questions for you. I do want to direct my questions back to Mr. Gakel, Mr. McGibbon, and possibly a representative from CADA. If there were 3 actions that you believe the agency should immediately take to address the issues that you've raised on today's call, what would you recommend?
Well, this is Don Gakel.
Yeah, okay.
Certainly the action that Chair Vasquez mentioned in extending the ability for people to file their final statement at a later date. I had already talked to my county council about Section 441 sub I, which allows for amended statements. Along with that, it also requires that an original statement be filed by May 7th. Certainly, if a taxpayer is filing a statement, if not complete, but with an explanation that their delay is due to COVID, certainly I would be inclined to accept that under 441 I provisions and allow them to file an amended statement when they were able to. Of course, but that under the current law, that has to be by May 31st. So I appreciate his putting that idea out there. Also, primary the wet signature issue, and I had talked to Ms. Fleming about that as well. In that a number of assessors, I know that Alameda County Assessor and Los Angeles County Assessor had sent letters in asking for the ability to accept those, and I had suggested to Ms. Fleming that it would be something simple the board could do to extend that authority to all assessors, given the guidelines that they've already approved for Alameda and Los Angeles County. So those are issues that definitely could be addressed. I do want to speak on John McKibben spoke very well on the appeals issue, but that certainly is something that should be addressed on a broader scale, especially for the large counties. Speaking for all assessors, I know that that's a huge issue in our county yet, but for the larger counties, they definitely need more consistent and reliable relief in terms of the the tolling dates on those appeals rather than, a succession of 40-day extensions. But I guess if that's what it takes, that would have to do. But to give something more reliable to them, as it does affect assessors as well.
Mr. Chairman, this is John McKibben, if I can speak.
Sure, go ahead.
In response to Member Cohen's question, Don Gakel said it very well. We need a broader relief than Section 155 with regard to the 2-year deadline in Section 1604. If we have to settle for a 1-year extension, we'll certainly be glad to do it, but we do need the success. We would need the successive relief under Section 155, not just a one-time only. I would say, just generally, relief on the 2-year deadline is our first, second, and third priority, short-term and long. We also would like and have tried to seek through CSAC relief from the governor's office about some other deadlines, including the notice of hearing, deadlines for preparation of findings of fact, certain scheduling requirements. We want some additional flexibility. So those would be our goals.
Are you seeing those goals as like short-term, or is that a mix of short and long-term?
It's a mix of short and long, I guess. I would say they're short-term primarily, and some mid-term. Long-term, major fundamental changes to the process are something that clerks are not probably going to weigh in on too much. Some of the things that Assessor Prang brought up, perhaps, might be examples. Because, again, as I said earlier, this is a program of the Board of Supervisors. It's not the clerk. So if you're talking about fundamental changes on how assessment appeals boards operate, or whether assessment appeals boards operate, or replaced by something else, you can't talk to clerks about that. You have to talk to the policymakers, the boards of supervisors, and CSAC would be the appropriate place to go for that.
The reason I bring it up is that I was just trying to focus, since we have limited time, on just the short term, and I was kind of looking and viewing that the midterm and the long-term goals, that we would definitely make sure we agendize those for our next May meeting. That's all.
Yeah, no, I see.
Well, how Mr. Chair, it's Malia Cohen. How are you defining short-term goals, midterm goals, and long-term goals?
I was determining short-term, within the next 90 days, for example. And then midterms, looking at it more, 6 months to 2 years out, and then long terms thereafter. For example, we started before COVID-19, to try to make an impact to help the assessors with hopefully generating more appraisers, right? We were talking about that emergency certificate. That obviously is a long term, and now it's probably even longer because of what's happened. I don't know when the community colleges are actually going to be up and running again the way they used to. So it may be a bit of a challenge. But so for me, that's why I was kind of looking at the wet signature and a few other things that I think we could do in the short term before our next meeting. That's how I was kind of breaking it down. Hearing nothing else.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Well,
you have other questions on this one?
Yeah, regarding kind of remote hearings.
Yes.
Excuse me. I want to go back to the Board of Equalization executive staff. I wanted to know if the BOE need to provide statewide guidance on accepting business property statements via email during this pandemic. Does the BOE need to provide statewide guidance on accepting business property statements via email during the pandemic? That's my question to the Board of Equalization executive staff.
Hi, this is Brenda. Thank you for your question, Ms. Cohen. Yes, staff, we are going to prepare guidance We've been talking about it for the last couple of days. As Mr. Gakel mentioned, we actually had a number of conversations about it. So we'll draft the guidance on how to apply for the approval. There's language in 441K that we're going to find a way that requires us to have an approval step, and we're going to just expedite through that step. Basically, it's very, very similar to what we did for Assessor Fong Law, for example, in Alameda. So, and then guidance will be provided that we will send out statewide so that all of the assessors are informed about the options. Ms. Cohen,
all right. Yes, thank you. Well, I'd just like to reiterate my recommendation that we ask that if anyone else is appropriate to add to my recommendation about a work group, that all stakeholders be involved. For example, we have representatives from CADA. They've been their stakeholder in this space. Staff. This might even help the chair determine the short-term, mid-term, and long-term goals, keeping in mind that we're in the middle of a pandemic, and so we need to move quickly. And I think that the more people that we have at the table, the more perspective that we will be able to bring. Also, want to recognize the representatives from the AAB. Thank you very much for your presentation. Very, very thoughtful and thorough. I hope that you will consider joining this work group. But I think that time is of the essence. I think that we must get to work immediately. I don't believe that we have time to wait until the end of May when the next board meeting is scheduled. That's why I'm proposing some thoughtful action items that I think that we should be able to deliver today, and that allows us to continue to roll up our sleeves and literally get to work tomorrow with a clear, succinct directive from not only taxpayers but also our stakeholders.
I agree. Let me see if there's any more questions before we get into some of those action items.
If I could, this is Member
Mr. Gaines, go ahead.
Yeah, just regarding the working group, can we make sure that we, I want a broad-based working group, but I want that also to include taxpayers?
Yes. Absolutely.
Yes.
Wonderful.
So my suggestions on the folks on the working group is not limited. It's just an idea. I'm not excluding anyone. Like I said earlier, that the more the merrier. Absolutely. Member Gaines. Thank you.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you. Another question, if I could, just on some comments that were made by Assessor Prang. He talked about a blanket waiver of penalty. And so I'm just wondering if we can I'd like to get a little advice on that, and wondering if, Mr. Nangio, can you comment on that? Is that something that we have authority to do?
This is Richard Boone. I think what Assessor Prang had been alluding to was the assessor's ask of the governor to be able to waive penalties for late filed business property statements. And one of the reasons why they needed to ask the governor for that authority is because they do not have that authority currently under statute. It's also authority that the board does not have. That authority belongs to the assessment appeals boards after an appeal is filed to waive the penalty for a late filed statement. So we do not have the ability to waive late filed payment penalties for a business property statement.
All right. But we have clarity on the 40-day issue, correct? So with Section 155, we can extend 40 days?
Yes, that's correct. 155 says we can extend for 40 days, and we believe that that's a single 40-day period.
Okay. And
before you leave that, real quick, Mr. Gaines, before you leave that, in 40 days, it starts counting as of April 1, right?
Well, it would depend on the deadline. So for the business property statement, we do not have the authority to extend the late filing the filing date for the business property statement, because 155 gives us the ability to extend deadlines that need to be met by the assessors or the county board. And so it would cover something like the 1604 two-year deadline that the assessment appeals boards need to meet, but it would not cover property statement filing deadlines that taxpayers need to meet.
Okay.
Then, I thought the 40-day, so it doesn't include the May 7th deadline that's coming up.
No, it does not.
Oh, okay.
All right. So I'm just trying to figure out what action we can take today. It looks like on the blanket waiver of penalty, we can't take action today on that. That sounds like an executive issue. Is that something that we could proceed forward with, working with with Assessor Prang and with you, Tony, as chair, in having that discussion with the governor's office?
Sure. Is
Okay.
Jeff Prang still on the line?
This is Don Gakel. Certainly, what Jeff was originally talking about was the assessor's position to have the authority to waive penalty after May 7th and up to May 31st. The Assessors Association did not suggest a blanket waiving of penalties, and so that would be a separate issue. We didn't get unanimous support for that among assessors, although I suspect that some assessors would use their authority to be very liberal in their interpretation, if granted that authority. But certainly that would be an issue that would affect all assessors, and I'd be happy to discuss that.
Okay. Could I make a motion?
Go ahead, Mr. Gaines.
That motion would be in reference to this issue regarding a blanket waiver of penalty as suggested by Assessor Prang, that we would have discussion with the governor and see if we could grant that on a blanket basis statewide. And then my second, maybe why don't I just address that issue first? I have a second motion I'd like to make too, if I could.
So this is Malia Cohen. Mr. Gaines, just so I'm clear, I'm unclear on the motion.
Yeah, the motion would be to start a conversation, discussion with the governor, asking for authority to issue a blanket waiver of penalty.
What about the perspective of the other assessors?
Well, this is Don Gakel. The position of the CAA was not to have a blanket waiver, so I'm really not in a position right now as CAA president to, support that. But I would be happy to engage in a discussion regarding, some form of penalty waiver.
Yeah, I'm going to probably not be. I'm not in a position to support the motion that you're proposing here today. I appreciate the eagerness to engage in a conversation, but I just feel like we're squelching other voices that are important, particularly the association, the Assessors Association, which is the main voice and representative. I think that should allow them an opportunity to come together, figure out, a cohesive message. I mean, I respect the LA County assessor, but I have 23 other assessors that I'd like to check in with and talk to and get feedback from. So I wouldn't be able to support that motion, Mr. Gaines.
Okay. I'd still like to take a vote on the motion. I think there's merit to it. I think we as a board need to take action, and there's very few areas that we can move forward on, granted our authority, and this is one area that we could provide relief statewide.
I totally agree that we should be able to take action and move forward, which is why we're proposing a working group that allows us to further explore, at least within the next 2 weeks. I think we owe it to ourselves to represent the interests of all assessors, not just a big county assessor. And again, I'm representing District 2, where I have the Bay Area's 9 largest and probably wealthiest of the counties in the state of California. I just think that a working group is probably a more logical, almost a medium space, so that there is action, but but it's a space that allows us to continue to work. And as a result of the working group, if the recommendation comes out to make a recommendation to the governor, then perhaps we make that governor, we move in that vein. But we have to represent everyone.
Member Gaines, maybe what might be more appropriate then, because we already have a letter that's sitting with the governor anyway, why don't we just take a look at, I think it was Vice Chair Schaefer was trying to make a motion earlier, but, he was in the midst, he kind of cut into Ms. Cohen's Q&A. So if Mr. Schaefer is still out there and is willing to make his motion, I think we could include, that could be part of that discussion of that task force and take up your concern and issue within that task force, if you're comfortable with that, Mr. Gaines.
Okay, but we have a motion on the floor, so how are we going to deal with that?
Well, that's what I'm asking you. Are you willing to retract it, because I was the seconder, and then we can move on with setting up this task force so we can deal with not only that issue, but I think there's several other immediate issues that we can take up, especially if we're well represented with not only the assessors but the taxpayers and several of the other groups that were on the call earlier today that gave their presentations that I think could be helpful stakeholders.
Yes, I will.
Okay, thank you. Did I hear Vice Chair back there?
Yes, Vice Chair Schaefer here. Reflecting Member Cohen's suggestion, I move that the Chair and the Vice Chair, that we form the working group of the Board of Equalization and county assessors and taxpayer organizations such as CADA to meet by teleconference over the next 2 weeks and present our findings to the board. Is there a second for that?
I'll second.
Yes, I'll second that.
Oh, Ms. Cohen also.
Taxpayers organizations such as CADA.
And I think Ms. Cohen mentioned, let's be as inclusive as possible. Especially, I know there were several members today that spoke out that we'll definitely reach out to. But if there was anybody that we're missing, by all means, please bring them forward. Because I think it's all about, this pandemic we're in, there's just so many things so many moving parts that I want to make sure we're not missing somebody or any group.
Vice Member Schaefer, I want to add taxpayers, quote, taxpayers as a group to this.
Oh, yes, thank you for doing that.
Yes, this is Paul Waldman from that. We definitely would like to be involved in that. Certainly, all of these issues, we would like to be involved in the working group and talk about it. As far as Member Cohen, you had asked sort of what our top issues were. Certainly, one of our is immediate tax relief of some sort. Well, I do agree with, I certainly agree with Marty, and I think that there is relief there now, but I think it's also worth discussing a little bit further to kind of cement something there that we might be able to do for immediate relief. We also, we certainly
Excuse me, is this the rep from CADA?
Yes, it is. This is Paul Waldman, President of CADA.
Paul, could you just hold for a second, though? Because we have this motion. Let us take action on this motion, and then we'll come right back to you.
My apologies. Go ahead.
No, just hold for a second. So if I don't hear any other comments or suggestions, can I get Ms. Davis to call roll on the motion by Mr. Schaefer and second by Ms. Cohen?
Chairman Vasquez?
Yes.
Vice Chairman Schaefer?
Aye.
Member Gaines?
Aye.
Member Cohen?
Aye.
Ms. Stowers? Ms.
Did we lose Ms. Stowers?
No, I'm here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No. Does this working group include BOE staff?
Well, I think they'll assist us, but I from what I'm gathering, it sounds like it's really more the stakeholders that we're looking at. But I'm open if you're suggesting that.
No, I was just trying to get clarification on the motion.
Okay.
Chairman Vasquez, as I understand the motion, just for all the parties listening in, so that we're clear, it is a working group of the chairman and the vice chair to meet with the identified and mentioned stakeholders and various other interested parties to discuss the issues and actions that the board can take in the next short term and midterm, I guess, is what I understood the motion to be. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Does that answer your question, Ms. Stowers?
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Yes.
All right, that's unanimous. So that's taken care of. I'm sorry. Paul, you can come back on now.
I apologize.
No problem.
Yeah, so no, it sounds like we'll be able to discuss a lot of the stuff in the working group, and that's great. Our concerns, as I said, are really sort of that immediate relief option of one sort or the other. And then also, one concern I did have, we were talking about tolling the 2-year deadline, and we definitely understand that there's some issues there that need to be looked at from the assessor side, but of course we want to be careful about how that's done, because obviously there's issues on the taxpayer side as well as far as getting that relief. And so I do think that also needs to be addressed along the way as well.
Mr. Chairman, this is John McKibben. Could I ask a question or make a comment?
I'm sorry. Yes, go ahead. I think I was muted.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just want to reiterate the clerks of the Board of Supervisors would like to be involved in that. I'm sure there are 2 or 3 clerks who would be very happy to sit in on the task force, as well as Assessment Appeal Board counsels, because it always helps to have the legal guys available, too, for that.
Well noted.
Thanks, sir.
Any others on the call that we might have forgotten?
Yes, I made the recommendation that the AAB have representation. Also, want to propose a friendly amendment or a new motion. I'm not quite sure what it would look like, but I want to make sure that that the work group meeting is noticed publicly so that any and all people can participate.
Well noted. Is there a rep on the line still is it the AAB you mentioned?
Mr. McGibbon, yeah. He just spoke.
I'm here.
So I'm just affirming what he said.
Oh, okay, gotcha. No, we got him. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Chair Vasquez?
Yes.
Could I clarify the motion? Because my initial motion was to discuss with the governor this blanket waiver of penalty. So would that be included in the working group?
Yes, that we can take it up. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Now, I know we cut you off a little bit, Mr. Gaines. Was there something else you had?
I had a second motion I'd like to bring, if I could.
Sure, go ahead.
And that would be to issue an advisory to the county assessors, granting them the ability to accept electronic signatures rather than the requirement of gathering wet signatures.
So I made that request. I'll second that motion. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the executive director was also in agreement. This may already be done. I don't know if we need to take it up as an action item, but it would be good for the board to be officially on the record.
Thank you. I think you're right. Brenda, you're on the line, right?
Hi, this is Brenda. I concur with Ms. Cohen. It's something that we're in motion. Feel free to take an official action on it in terms of the public record by taking this motion in second, but we are indeed, as Ms. Cohen suggested, we're already working on it.
So it sounds like all in favor could just say aye here.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, members.
Chairman Vasquez, this is Henry Nancho, Chief Counsel.
Yes.
Just want to be a little careful there. I think we can encourage that of the counties. I don't know that we can require it because I know the Board of Supervisors of each county also has jurisdictions as to whether or not to accept electronic signatures. So I would recommend, and different counties may have different abilities to accept electronic signatures. So I would strongly recommend that we strongly encourage the counties, but I don't believe we have the authority to require that.
So thank you for that comment, Henry. Just to clarify for everyone, what we're doing is offering some guidance as to what the options are and what's available process-wise. We've actually already exercised this with some of the counties already, so we're not mandating it, just to be clear, for the counties to follow. The counties do have the right to opt in or opt out. We're simply making sure that all the counties are informed about what's available for an expedited process.
And it was my understanding on the motion, we just wanted to go on record that we're in support of that.
That's correct. Member Gaines, the intent of the motion, I thought I mentioned it, advisory letter. So it would be an advisory letter from the BOE, just providing clarification from our perspective that it's okay for that to happen in the counties.
Great. Thank you, Member Gaines. I just wanted to make sure the record was clear.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Henry.
Also, for the record, I just want to state that as it relates to what signatures San Diego County offers, electronic signatures, they are the only one in the state of California. They've been doing this for the last 3 years, so this is an example that it actually does work even prior to such a calamity as the pandemic that we're dealing with. Thank you.
Kudos to Ernie.
Yeah, this is Don Gakel. It is a comment, and Henry's comments are well taken. Stanislaus County is working for an electronic signature solution that would be across the county, but that's with our county council right now. So we don't have the ability to accept actual, what we refer to as electronic signatures. I think where most assessors are thinking more in terms of faxed in copies and emailed copies and those sorts of things, which is, I think, the relief that Assessor Allah and Assessor Prang were seeking when they sent their letters in, more in that vein.
That is correct.
Yes. And since I have you on the line, in regards to the working group, I assume we don't want something like Congress, so you're not expecting all 58 assessors there. What are you anticipating?
No. A matter of fact, maybe following what Member Cohen has mentioned, I think if we just had, maybe 3, obviously a large, a medium, and a small assessor.
Okay. Will you be sending out something by email and writing regarding that working group?
You should have it in an email tomorrow.
Okay. Thank you.
Anybody else has any other thoughts or ideas or motions they want to put forward?
Perhaps.
This is Yvette.
I'm sorry, Yvette. Go ahead.
Is the working group going to address Section 170? Because it appears to be a conflict between what the assessors are saying and the tax agents, whether or not you have to have physical damage, and how on point this case is. Is the working group prepared to do that, or is it more appropriate for our legal team to take a second look at 170 and the case that was cited and provide us with the additional legal analysis on what that case stands for?
Deputy Controller Stowers, this is Henry Nanjo. Legal can take a look at that and provide some information to the board. I would also encourage anybody who has citations or who wanted to present their side of it or their interpretation, such as Mr. DeCasian, to go ahead and email me his thoughts, and we will definitely take that into consideration and analyze those as well.
I'd also like to just acknowledge Ms. Stowers' question. Yes, absolutely, Ms. Stowers. All issues that are raised today and others that we haven't even raised will be discussed and considered, fully vetted, particularly as all of this relates to navigating through this pandemic.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. I appreciate that, both of you.
Thank you.
If I could weigh in, this is Member Gaines.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Gaines.
I just want to agree with Member Cohen on this, and Member Stowers, thank you for bringing up for clarification, but I do believe that the calamity relief issue ought to be addressed by the panel, and then we can also get advice from our legal counsel as we proceed. Thank you.
Members, if we're not hearing any more, I know everybody's kind of holding back on the midterm and long term, so I had a list of those, but at least for now, I think this task force could dive into some of the, just obviously several ones that we've already mentioned, and then of course, once we gather up, I'm sure there'll be other suggestions that'll come out of the working group. So with that, I'd like to say that we are pretty much wrapped up on this M item. And unless there's
Mr.
anything
Chair,
else
this is Malia.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr.
Chair, if I may have the floor, yeah. I think given the heaviness, the gravity, and the seriousness of the items that we discussed today, kind of warrants and necessitates a need for us to respond. And I think that meeting once a month might be woefully inadequate. Perhaps this body could entertain a motion that I'd like to make to meet in 2 weeks, so that we can come together to discuss where we are in our progress, to discuss where the work group is meeting. Of course, this will be publicly noticed. We are always cognizant of not violating Bagley-Keene. 2 weeks, if that seems too soon, I'm happy to consider it 3 weeks. I'm just concerned that a lot of things will happen between now and our end of May meeting that may require us to come together to take a vote, if anything, even to have a discussion. So I'd like to make a motion for us to consider meeting in 3 weeks to follow up on these, particularly the short-term action items that you yourself have laid out.
Question
here from the work group.
Member Cohen?
Yes, sir.
This is Ted Gaines. If I could just, so your thought is that if something comes up in the next, say, 7 to 10 days, that we have an earlier meeting, because I keep thinking of the timeline. We have the 10 days notice, right? So, okay. All right. I'm in favor of that. Do you need a second?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
You bet.
Members, this is Henry Nanjo. As Board Proceedings Chief, I just wanted to point out that if you are going to give sufficient notice for your working group to have a meeting, that's going to be probably not less than 2 weeks out. You're talking about having a board meeting a week after that, and I will remind you about the PAN deadlines. If you're having a meeting in 3 weeks, those agenda items for that meeting would actually be due a week before you have your working group meetings, which may make it a little challenging to anticipate what you want on your agenda for your 3-week meeting. So just please keep in mind the agenda requirements, because it seems to me if you're having a working group meeting within the next 2 weeks, that's going to make it really challenging to have a board meeting 3 weeks out and then another board meeting a week and a half after that.
Well, this is Yvette speaking. Can we just, Ms. Cohen, how do you feel about having the board meeting on Tuesday, May 19th? And if that's workable for you, could we also do the other items on that date?
Sure. Just give me a second. Let me just take a look at the agenda. Or let me look at the calendar.
While you're doing that, I thought the whole purpose of this task force was to really get into the short term now. And I think, as we meet, especially if we're calling all these stakeholders together, if something comes up, obviously, during this next week or two that we think is an emergency, then I think it'd probably be appropriate to try to call for an emergency meeting. But I'm a little taken back that we would want to put that on top of our task force, and I think they're just going to be overlapping.
Well, what I'm proposing is to take action that gives us the flexibility. If we're struggling or unable or deem it unnecessary, then we don't have to follow through.
So
we have to plan for the future. We have to plan to give ourselves that flexibility. If not, something could come up, and we have no flexibility. We are restricted to meeting at the next possible meeting time. So I also just want to ask our chief counsel to weigh in on whether the pandemic allows us to waive any of our requirements. I believe that we've experienced difficulty in scheduling an emergency meeting, in the past, but to be fair, this is a pandemic and an emergency, and all hands on deck, and this matter deserves our immediate attention. So I would not be discouraged by, obstacles that Henry presented as pan deadlines and putting together agenda. I can think of 10,000 things that we could put on the agenda that would be thoughtful and meritorious of our discussion, and not just us as a board, but again, we are allowing an opportunity for the larger taxpayer community to weigh in and be part of this discussion. So again, my proposal is allowing us the flexibility. If for whatever reason it is deemed unnecessary, then we don't have to adhere to it.
Okay, I thought you were already setting it up. Yeah, if you're saying we should give ourselves that flexibility, I don't think there's any harm in it, especially as we're moving forward with this task force.
Yes, exactly.
Not a problem.
So I think that Yvette had suggested a May 19th date as an interesting compromise. Let me see one.
I could pull it back on that. I could just, like you just said, as we have the working group meeting, if something comes up and we have to meet before the scheduled board meeting, then it sounds like the chair is willing to call an emergency meeting.
Mm-hmm. Okay, perfect.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So is it clear, Ms. Cohen, on your motion that we're not giving it a date, we're leaving it open-ended, depending on how things are moving forward? Is that what you're saying?
Half of what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that in order for us to keep ourselves and give ourselves enough flexibility, perhaps we can consider a date of May 11th.
Well, I wouldn't want to put a date on it. I would support it if you leave it open-ended.
All right. That's fine. I'm happy to leave it open. I just want to double check with our chief counsel, Mr. Nanjo. I guess if you could opine on this, is it better to leave it open, or is it better to put down a date on the record and then just notice that the meeting is canceled?
So you have more flexibility if you leave it open. If you put a date down now and you're not ready, but you would be ready in a week, you're kind of that limits you, for lack of a better term.
Okay, that sounds good then. Then I'll take the date out. Again, this is just a motion that would allow us flexibility to call a meeting, to call a meeting to address issues that come up in the work group. That then ultimately could allow us an opportunity to move things and move the conversation forward to speak with the governor's office.
So
Sounds good.
thank you for that, Ms. Cohen. Chairman Vasquez, this is Brenda. So the May board meeting is May 27th and 28th, and so we would need to protect that date because we've got, we've got statutory work that we've got to take up on relative to state assessees. However, what it does give us is the May 27th meeting right now is also scheduled for 2 days. So I agree with the motion to try to do what I would just refer to for the sake of this discussion, an interim meeting. To Ms. Cohen's point, somewhere in that week of, May, let's look at the calendar, looking at May 11th week. So something that's in between now and then, but then just putting on the record that you will have another opportunity in May if you wanted to exercise the second day, if should it be necessary based upon, how this whole pandemic and all these issues are evolving. So just for the record, we still have to give a 10-day notice, of course, for the interim meeting. But just note that we do need to make sure that the state assessed staff are protected to get their work done for that May 27th meeting. May 28th would be open to you.
Thank you, Ms. Fleming. I appreciate you reminding us about the important agenda items on the 27th. And I am in no way saying that we should compensate or negate that duty. What I'm suggesting is an additional meeting in May, and totally we're mindful as a former chair of this body, know the 10-day PAN rule, and will honor all of those deadlines within the deck.
Thank you, ma'am.
So let's go ahead and we'll just plan to schedule 2 meetings in the month of May, one possibly during the week of May 11th, and then again our formally scheduled meeting of May 27th, 26th or 27th, I'm not quite sure.
Yeah, 27th and 28th, yes, ma'am.
Okay, 27th and 28th.
So just a quick clarification, Ms. Cohen. So I thought we're leaving it open-ended. It sounds like you're going.
Yes, I'm sorry. My apologies. I am. It is open-ended. My apologies.
If you're open-ended, I'm on board. Yes.
I'll take out the reference to the having a meeting scheduled the week of May 11th. My apologies. I misspoke.
Perfect.
So, Mr. Chair, if it's possible, I believe the motion has changed.
You want to reiterate it?
I will reiterate it, and then I'll ask.
Then we'll take a vote.
And then, perfect. Thank you. So I just reiterate that let's schedule 2 meetings for the month of May. Second.
We're giving ourselves that option, basically.
That's correct.
Got it.
Still stuck in that. I second that motion.
All righty.
Thank you, Ms. Dowers.
Hearing no other comments or suggestions, do we need to take a roll call, or can we just have a yay? Ms. Davis?
Tony's using yay.
Chairman Vasquez,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Schaefer,
Yay.
Member Gaines,
Aye.
Member Cohen,
Aye.
Ms. Dowers.
Aye.
Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. Now, I believe that should conclude item N from now. Correct? Hearing no other comments or suggestions, Ms. Davis, can you please call our next item?
There are no other items of business on today's agenda.
So with that, unless we have some adjourning motions, I would like to officially adjourn this meeting. Thank you, everybody, and actually really thank the staff. I know this was a very lengthy thing, and especially the speakers if they're still on the line, for your time and energy to present today. But thank you.
Yes, thank you for the presenters. Thank you for everyone for hanging in there with us. We'll get through this.
Oh, we thank you, Paul Alderman Buchanan. Thank you very much.
Stay safe.
Yes, we thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Mr. Chair, before we adjourn, I'd like to just adjourn in the honor of those who have lost their lives, and also recognizing the women that are. I'm sorry. We did Women's History Month in March of last month. My apologies.
No, we'll officially do that when we regroup. But yes, thanks for bringing that up. We should adjourn in memory of all the lives that have been lost, especially throughout the state of California, but of course all over the world.
Yeah, this is Member Gaines. Likewise, thank you for bringing that up. It is a pandemic. We've lost thousands of lives across the country. We're not through it yet, but light is on the horizon. So thank all of the members and everybody that participated today. Thank you.
Thank you, members. And with that, we are adjourned.
And ladies and gentlemen, that does conclude our conference for today. Thank you for your participation, and you may now disconnect.